I think that the education system overall is becoming increasingly fragmented, just like media has become fragmented into these silos, these verticals. And it's much less about the generalist education and much more about the niche down education. Yeah. And so I believe I want to find the best, mechanic and how he teaches mechanics to run better shops. I want to find the best salon owner so she can help salon owners run better salon clinics. I want to find the best lawn care guy and how he can package and sell his ability to help other people who do lawn care, because it's so much more practical. If you know you're going to go into lawn care, there's no college for that, and there should be. Yeah. And so that's kind of our investment thesis for acquisition.com, and that's what we do now, and the portfolio does right now over $100 million a year.
Well, education starts really early.
Yeah.
How would you change that right now with, let's say, the current schooling system, which seems to teach you kind of how to stay in line, how to think like everybody else, get your homework done on time. You got to show up at 8 a.m. Yeah. School ends at 3. Do you think that's a good model?
I mean,
obviously the answer is no. But tell me your thoughts on that.
I think so. I've two broad statements is, I think the purpose of education is to teach people how to think rather than how to memorize. And especially now with technology that we have, if you can pass a test with having an iPhone with you, then in my opinion, the test was poorly designed, because it's not going to, and then we have to rewind into what is the purpose of education, right? The education system overall is the product of that is people who can add value to society, right? That's the product of the education system. The raw units are humans. The output of the system is people who can add value to society. Okay, cool. So if that's the system, then there's a lot of leeway there in terms of how we can get there. I think the system that we have set up is inherited from the factory worker, when it was being designed versus now. Now I think we need a lot more problem-solving skills than we did back then, a lot more dynamic thinking processes, divergent thinking processes. And if you're not familiar with this, is a fun little exercise. So what school teaches right now is convergent thinking. And so that means that there's multiple variables and one correct answer, right? And so it's 1 + 1 = 2. There's only one correct answer. And now they're even telling you there's only one way to find the answer. And if you don't find it the way they want you to find it, then it's also wrong, which is ridiculous. But anyways, divergent thinking is when you have multiple variables, but multiple correct answers, which is how many different ways can you use a brick? And what's interesting about that is that you can also have multiple right answers and some answers that are more right than others, which becomes very difficult to grade, but also how the real world works. Yeah. And we're rewarded based on how right our YouTube video really is, right? Or how right our article is, or how right our product is, and how we can solve problems using more creative methods than trying to converge on a single answer. Because if it's a convergent thinking process, for the most part, it's already been kind of automated and everyone can do it, right? You get paid for what you can think of in the creative box of what are other people not thinking of? And so I think that more of the education system should be around divergent thinking and divergent problem solving.
Do you think that's ever going to happen?
No. Mostly just because of the power dynamics that exist. And if you've ever saw the documentary Waiting for Superman,
I haven't seen it.
It was one of the only movies that I've cried during, because it was just the education system. And it was just showing how there are so many impediments to it getting fixed. It's not just one party. You've got the teachers unions, you've got the funding for the schools, you've got there's all of these things that are almost all diametrically opposed to one another. And then the only people who really suffer are the kids, and then ultimately the country. So anyways, I do think that the solution is, I think the way that it'll have to get solved is that there is an alternative schooling system that gets developed that, because of technology, Naval Ravikant said this, but technology democratizes consumption and consolidates production, which means if you're the best in the world, you get to do it for everyone, right? Which a lot of people don't like from a capitalist perspective, but that's also silly because I feel like that's just Pareto at work. But why would you not want the best math teacher teaching everyone math? Mm-hmm. It makes sense. Yeah. And because there's zero cost of duplication, and now everyone's kind of understands how Zoom works and how we can continue to using life virtually, there's really no reason to have, now it gets scary because teachers unions and what are all these people going to do for work and all that stuff. But the value, just like the switchboards for when there used to be girls who would switch for telephones, they're what are we going to do when technology automates that? there will be other, like Web3 is just blowing up. There will be jobs as we solve new problems, we'll create new ones.
Yeah.
Right. And so to say like, we have to keep something that doesn't make sense, doesn't provide value to the system for the sake of it, doesn't make sense to me. And so I think that it would probably have to be a new architecture where the best people teach and then kids learn, probably at their own pace. And the testing would probably have to change in order for it to be more real world. And if we wanted it to be real world, then I think you need to match conditions, which is real world. You have your phone, like now take the test.
Yeah.
Don't you think that like the schooling system would need to be somewhat localized though? Like you can't have one person teaching over too big of a,
imagine one person controlling everyone's math.
Yeah, like if you have one math teacher, that's teaching everyone in the country. Don't you think that there's like an advantage to having like, because each little part in each country has,
and it doesn't have to be one person. It's more like it could be one system. You know what I mean? Like that's more semantics. You know what I mean? And if the best person is more localized by the way they speak or whatever, then sure. But I mean, we're sitting next to Graham, who's got a massive personal finance channel. And so if you're the best at personal finance, then more people will go to you. So like,
that makes sense. Yeah.
It does. Your schooling system does remind me. I completely forgot about Jack. I don't think you know about this. So in kindergarten, I had issues. And
really?
Yeah. In fact, my parents
explains a lot.
My parents pulled me out of the school because after recess, they wanted all the kids to line up in order on this yellow line that led up to the front door. And so all the kids were supposed to line up on that line. The bell was ringing, and we all had to walk in one by one. And I didn't want to stand on that line. And the teachers got really upset at me because I didn't stand on the line.
Why didn't you want to stand on it?
I don't remember. I think at the point I just didn't see. I thought it was stupid, or like I just didn't get why I needed to stand on the line. I didn't like standing on the line. And my parents pulled me out mid-year kindergarten to go to an alternative school. And that's the school that didn't have any grades. They had no assigned seating. It was basically a big room. And this continued, by the way. So this school went until 8th grade, but no grades. It was either you got a check plus or a check minus on any assignments that maybe, and the assignments were kind of like BS anyway. They're like, draw something or like share something that you're excited about. But I loved it, and that was
it's amazing.
And that was that. But that's what it really helped me, because I hated homework, I hated tests, I didn't like any of it, and I just wanted to do my thing.
But even being in kindergarten, you were the same person as you are today.
Yeah, I didn't want
to stand on the line. You only do what you want to do when you want to do it, and that's incredible that it's like traced all the way back to when you were in kindergarten.
Yeah.
Might be great parenting too, because I mean, like I would say that I was very different when I was younger, because it was very much like if I wasn't on the yellow line, my dad would be like, "Why weren't you on the yellow line?" Like get on the yellow line. right, and then that would be the end of that conversation, and I would be on the yellow line the next morning. And so, it's great parenting too that they were let you do your thing.
That is very true. But I do think that really helps to have something that's different.
That's interesting to me because you were an academic, right? Mm-hmm. And if you could go back in time, do you think you would have spent so much time trying to do so well in school?
Yes. Because I think if something's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And that's more of like a personal belief.
Was school worth doing though?
I think that it depends on what age, because if you're learning to work hard, and if you're like learning what hard work is, then I think that is a valuable lesson. If we're like the actual subject matter, more or less irrelevant. I think that once people understand math and reading, then that's pretty much what you need to go and learn the world. So that's, if I were to like make recommendations to college students, I would say be a math and English double major, because that's everything you need for life, much more so than the other stuff.
Right.
But even with math classes, shouldn't they be teaching you how to use the iPhone app? On like how to do math, and like here's an iPhone. We all get iPhones. Let's add, subtract. Here's how you could do this. Here's a more complicated calculator.
I think that there's an element to it that should be there. Having a baseline of intelligence for math, I think, is useful. I used to be really bad at math, or at least I identified with being bad at math, and it was until my mid-20s where I decided I wasn't going to be bad at math anymore. And so I actually stopped using a calculator which would make it seem like I'm contradicting my point, and only did mental math for like a number of years and like calculated the tip, on the bill with mental math. And I would try and, do all the marketing metrics and all the sales metrics just in my head. And then I would still use the calculator to check myself. And then you get better and better and better at it. And so I think there's an essence of having like a semblance of like being directionally correct so that you can make kind of large, quick decisions. But in terms of like exact calculations, the calculator does make more sense. Also, just using Excel for most people's life is probably even better than learning a calculator. Like I bought a book on Excel when I was in college, and I was like, why are we not learning this? Like every single job, you need to learn how to use Excel.
I agree.
Personal finance, there's so many uses for it, and I had to learn how to do all it was just a book of the equations, like, equals sum, and I was like, oh, that's how you do that. Like I had no idea. And so I think those would be the more useful things. But I mean, a lot of people know that there's problems with the education system, but they say I hear, I forget, I see, I remember, I do, and I understand. So that's Confucius. And so I think if there were more, like if I were to create a school around a skill, the school would be doing the skill. So if I wanted to teach sales, like they'd be selling, they wouldn't be learning sales theory. And so I think that there needs to be more application of the stuff to what people are going to use it in the real world. It's just so difficult to change curriculum. So I think it's going to have to be an alternative path that's really flexible, that continues to, and they can't do the same thing the old one did, which is like, this is now the way things are, because then it'll get outdated too. So there has to be a built-in kind of innovation wheel for not just adding, but also subtracting what things are no longer useful. Because I think that's what people have more fear of. They just want to keep adding and adding and adding, but they don't also just like say, this isn't really high utility. If we could start all over again, would we include this course or we include this method? Probably not. So let's just let it go.
Yeah. It's too bad that you couldn't create some sort of curriculum like that, though. Like a practical, just a 2-year thing that, might be 10 grand or something like that. I don't know how much you would charge for that, but for 2 years, just practical life skills, selling, Excel. I think Photoshop would be on that. Social media, how to make a good TikTok, how to keep retention,
how to send an email, how to send an email, right?
Yeah. That's a big one too.
How to message people.
Yeah.
It's because fundamentally this is just how to communicate, how to human.
Right.
That's what it is. And we have to learn all these things on our own. And there is the alternative education industry, which, you have a course, and like there's you could depend on how you look at it. Like a franchise is an education system. It's just packaged differently. Yeah. And so like there's lots of different ways of skinning the education game. But I think alternative is the way that is going to is the only way that I think it'll emerge.